Alexi Yashin, Chris Phillips, Bonkett Smollett, Mike Fisher, Marion Hossa, Martin Havlat, Pizza Line, Ray Emery, Brian Murray, Redden, Lee Cowan, Smith, Neal, Fat By Guide Walrus, Chara, Heatley, Alfie all left the team, Andrew Hammond, Kyle Tursa, Benajat, Double D on Mark Stone, Carlson, Matt Duchesne to single, Hogberg, Shabata, Chuck, Unparalleled success. We didn't start the rebuild. It was always brewing since 2009. We didn't start the rebuild. No, we didn't start it, but this time we've got it. Welcome to the latest edition in the Canadian Division preview for the upcoming NHL season. I'm your host, Ryan Woods, and joining me today is Jeff Gould. How's it going, Jeff?
It's going amazing. Good to see you, Ryan, and good to be here.
Right on. I had an easy time coming up with some fans to cover the Eastern Canadian teams. I've already got the Ottawa, Toronto, and Winnipeg episodes out there. But living in Ottawa, I don't know too many people who support the Western Canadian teams, so to find a guest, I did what anybody else would do in the 21st century. I went on Facebook and made a post in a hockey Facebook group asking for people who supported the Canucks, and I've seen your post in the group. You're quite the Canucks fan, so I'm happy to have you on the show. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and how you became a fan of the Canucks?
Absolutely. So I'm actually living in Dallas, Texas, by way of Arizona, which is where I grew up. I am a licensed chemical dependency counselor who is just now starting to do some very, innovative work in the traumatic brain injury space, where substance use and traumatic brain injury intersect. And so having a lot of fun with that. I was born in Los Angeles and raised in Arizona. I was a guy that had some struggles growing up, and somebody took me to, it would have been about January of 2000. Someone took me to a Division II hockey game. I'd never been to a hockey game. And it literally just kind of head over heels in love with the sport. And so having traveled 2 continents later, and I got about 110 jerseys in the closet, and have been to maybe 11, 13, 14 NHL arenas, something like that. Have just really grown to love the sport. I'd kind of been a closet. The thing about the United States is you can like whoever you want. You can live in Topeka, Kansas, and like the Pittsburgh Steelers, and many do, and so it was kind of post West Coast Express, but pre 2011 Stanley Cup run with the Sedins, and I just like the way the Twins played. I kind of like the vibe and the energy coming out of that city. I liked and still do the politics surrounding the team coming out of it, and it was just a team I fell in love with, which was good because we've had some pretty hard years between 2011 and now, so it's not been a lot of fun. But one good year and all is forgiven, right? So I'm having a lot of fun watching Vancouver these days. Yeah.
I bet, because last year they were the top Canadian team in terms of playoff results. They were the only Canadian team to make it to the conference semifinals. So they pushed the Vegas Golden Knights to 7 games, upset the defending Stanley Cup champion St. Louis Blues. So after looking at the results from last season, do you think that raises expectations going into this year?
I think for the lukewarm or tepid hockey fan, it really sets us up. So Ryan, I had, in anticipation of this conversation, I sat down and looked at some numbers, and overall in the last 2 years against all the Canadian teams, we are 13-19. We've been miserable against Winnipeg. I mean, I don't remember the last time when we beat Winnipeg. Also, the Leafs kind of have our number. I want to say Edmonton, we beat them 4 times. They beat us 3 times. Calgary's a 4-4 split in the last 2 years. And so the truth is if we went 500 in this season, and I don't know if that's good enough to make the playoffs, if we went 500 in this season, that means we would be much improved against the other Canadian teams. But will the fans in Vancouver see it that way? Probably not. That's the truth. Probably not. I'll be excited. And so, you know, in anticipation for this interview, it's like, okay, so which Vancouver team are we talking about? Are we talking about the team in August that was just swinging for the fences every night? And I mean, it was a beautiful thing to witness, a team that had found their mojo and was just pushing forward and pushing forward. Or are we going to see they're pretty marginal against other Canadian teams. They don't fare well against them. And Ryan, between you and I love it. This is like Karate Kid stuff. If you want to be a better team, hockey team, play the teams that have your number 9 times. You may not make it in the playoffs, but you're going to have to learn how to play hockey, right? So I don't mind the matchup at all. So
I love it. That's a great statistic that nobody else would have known unless they were a Canucks fan. So that's exactly why I went out to get you to come on the show. And that definitely puts things in perspective with the Canadian division this year. Another interesting development for the Canucks this offseason involved like several unrestricted free agents signing with divisional rival Calgary Flames. How do you think that Jim Benning did in terms of replacing players like Markstrom, Tanev, Troy Stecher, and Tyler Toffoli this offseason?
well, let's start from the back with Tyler Toffoli. We lost a blue chip prospect, Tyler Madden, to pick him up. And in truth, the reality of it was like a new kid that gets a shiny new electric toy for Christmas, and by December 28th, it's broken. I mean, it wasn't his fault. He's a great player. He was just injured, but he didn't bring a lot. He was added obviously at the deadline, and then the season was shut down, so there wasn't much for him to add in the regular season. And then he was injured. I want to say in Game 2 against Minnesota Wild, and didn't return. I'm kind of making this up. I feel like he didn't return until maybe Game 5 or 6 of St. Louis, maybe even later. So the fact that they added him, though, there's kind of two lines of thinking around hockey and those that enjoy the game. I can see that the very pragmatic, logical, if you don't think you're good enough to win the cup, why are you adding rentals? I get that kind of thinking, but I look at those people like, do you even care about hockey? Do you even enjoy the game? You add Reynolds so you can swing for the fences and go as hard as you can until your fortune's end. That's why you add the Reynolds, because we love hockey and we love to see it played on the ice, and who knows what can happen. I don't mind the swap for, in theory, that we gave up a Tyler Madden to see, we entered a tournament with 24 teams, and it was just like, let's give it a go and see what happens. So I don't know. That was a bitter pill when he wasn't replaced. But waiting in the wings, we had um, Vasily Podkolzin. I want to make sure I pronounce that right. Nils Hoglander, which I'm wearing his jersey right now, as a matter of fact. So that was good. Stetcher. Hmm, Stetcher wasn't a bad player. I'll throw out some stats. So if I'm gonna weigh Stetcher against his replacement, will potentially be Ollie Ulevi, who's been buried with injuries. He was our what? He was drafted like third, I want to say, in 2014, 15, somewhere in there, and he's been like, we were on the verge of just saying it hasn't panned out. So Ulevi in a 45 game stretch had 2 goals and 23 assists and was a -8, um, and had 24 penalty minutes, whereas Stetcher in a bigger sample size, 68 games, had 5 goals and 12 assists and was a +10. When I saw the +10, I was pretty surprised. I was like, actually, Stetcher was like, he really carried the blue line there as opposed to the -8. But what I think I get out of Ulevi's numbers is with all those assists, he's a good first pass out of the zone. And if he gets buried in his own zone, he's probably going to cough up the puck and they're going to score a goal. That's what I make up about those numbers of him playing in the Utica. So that was maybe a step back. And then I look at Tanev, 2 goals, 18 assists, +4. weighed against Schmidt, who had 7 goals, 24 assists, and was a plus 11, whose overall shot percentage was 6.3. And so, Tanev was a stay-at-home guy that didn't make a lot of mistakes. I really liked him as a player. We had brought him up. We had brought him up from the Moose in 2011. I think some of his first hockey he really played in Vancouver. He got brought up to replace, I want to say, Christian Ehrhoff in the Bruins series. So he had been around for a while. Not a flashy guy, but there wasn't a lot of things he did wrong. What I like about the addition of Schmidt is, Travis Green is very much about activating that defense and getting them up into the rush. And Schmidt's a gamer. He's that guy. He is that guy that's going into that system and work well. I mean, how many times last year did we see a Quinn Hughes doing a coast to coast, like the forwards were hanging back on the blue line and letting the defenseman take the rush and kind of mixing it up like that. So, that said, and Markstrom, we had to if we didn't let Markstrom go, we were going to lose Demko to Seattle. And so, um, what a player he was. He was amazing, but from a general manager perspective, it was necessary. So, um, you know, before we had added Schmidt and before we had taken on Hamonic, it really looked like a disaster. It was like, oh my God, what did we just do? We took 4 steps back. But I would say we're a little bit improved, right? And then I guess I could wait for you to ask about him, or I could tell you about him. I left. I've traveled across the country to go see Vancouver play a number of times and followed them on a bunch of road games. But on one of those stops, I stopped up in Rochester to see the Americans play Utica, and I'd really gone to see Demko, and I'd gone to see Jordan Subban at the time, who I didn't know was a healthy scratch. He was already kind of being, he was already a healthy scratch, but Demko was so poised and so controlled, and they were buzzing his net and hacking at it, hacking away at it and trying to, push it past him. And he just had this element of poise and control. I mean, he's a Southern market guy. He's a Southern California, San Diego, as it were. And so his sample size in NHL when he was filling in for Markstrom wasn't great. Regular season, I think he was 18-13 with a 302 and a 906 save percentage, as opposed to that 9.85 or 0.985 save percentage we saw in the playoffs. So again, it's like, which one's the real guy? Is he the marginal backup goal regular season, or is he potentially the lights out guy? And that'll be interesting to see. And then, of course, we added, I was going to say, Backstrom, and that. Who's the other goalie we added from Washington? I'm kind of blanking on this.
Braden Holtby.
Thank you. Overall, his numbers are pretty pedestrian. I was actually surprised. I don't remember, and I didn't write them down, but I looked at his career numbers overall. Pretty pedestrian goalie with obviously flashes of brilliance. I mean, he's won a Stanley Cup, but I think he was also put in there as that protection. The Seattle Kraken coming into the league next year kind of threw a twist. And anyone with some intelligence built their roster around the fact that they had to lose somebody. And I think Jim Benning did that masterfully. So,
if we go ahead and take a peek at the lines for Friday night for Group A, you mentioned that Travis Green is a little bit secretive with his line combinations so far in training camp, but this is a pretty good representation of what I think we can expect for tomorrow night against the Oilers. What do you like and dislike about this lineup?
I love that top line. JT Miller, what a gamer. I mean, like, who knew his next best season, he got 56 points as a New York Ranger in 16. And then I think he had been misdeployed in Tampa, which is a team that was loaded with talent. And so nobody really knew what JT Miller was until he got to Vancouver. And, I'm sure everyone that really follows hockey know what a story that is. He loves playing there. I love that he's on the line with those two young guys. I think that's a great fit. You know, going on Nils Hoglander, I really like that he's riding shotgun with Horvat. I had to go back and look at some highlights before this podcast, and it was interesting to watch. Rarely does he skate at a 90-degree angle, standing straight up like I might or like you might. I felt like I was watching a downhill Olympic snow skier watching him skate. He was just always pivoting and cutting back and forth at these really harsh angles while really he's really something to see. And so we had talked online, and he had done a couple of Michigans, and he likes to do that fancy stuff that's going to draw the ire of your opponents. I'm going to say Vancouver's probably one of the lighter teams in the league in the Canadian division. And so people are going to be pounding on him a lot, and people are going to make him a target. For that reason, I like that he's playing necessarily a fighter, but he will stick up for his guys. And he's just an all around meat and potatoes player. And I think to have him in kind of that stable of uh, Horvat and Pearson are definitely bigger guys. So I like that line combo. The one inaccuracy, Louis Erickson has been waived. So he's no longer there. And then, we saw some flashes of Cannon may never pan out to be what he was projected to be. I believe he was the first round pick. But he makes a great third liner. I think he could grow into his. I really like his instincts. I always have. I don't remember if anyone saw. I think there was a Penticton tournament where he buried Connor McDavid. I mean, and just looked at him and said, "Keep your head up, dude." And he had actually put somebody's head into the stanchion his first year, and we saw no more of Jake for a while. He was down in Utica after that, but I really like his instincts, and I thought they've tried to pull too much of that back, not to get him to take bad penalties. And I think he kind of forgot who he was and what he was, right? Like he's a heavy hitting, hard hitting player that's trying to adapt to how they want him to play. I really like him. He's kind of not very well liked among the Vancouver faithful. Tyler Mott was another one. I mean, he was the hero for a night in what was it? I want to say it was Game 6 against Lewis, where he got the opening and the closing goal. One of them was on a penalty kill, and he just cut through traffic and made it. He made it. He was like Sidney Crosby for about 10 seconds, maybe 6 seconds, and he made it look so easy. And so I like our third and fourth lines. I like Zach McEwen. We're going to need him a lot. I think Vancouver is going to get pushed around a lot this season. And so McEwen's good. Roussel's okay. He does kind of does some stupid stuff sometimes, but Roussel is Alex Burrows 2.0. Let's just call him what he is. Not quite as slick in goal scoring as Burrows was, but yeah, I like the roster. I think we're one or two pieces away from being what the Avalanche is now in about 3 years. And as soon as we get out of this recapture penalty with Luongo, Louis Erickson's been waived. His salary's still on the books. And so, Vancouver is a team that'll spend to the cap. And as soon as we get that little bit of money back, add Vasily Pod I'm not going to pronounce his name right. When Vasily comes over from the KHL, I think we'll be rolling for some time to come. So,
Right on. I wanted to ask you about 2019 Calder Trophy winner Elias Pettersson as he's entering the final year of his entry-level contract. What do you think that this young elite player can continue to do to develop this season? And are you at all worried about what his next contract might look like?
well, he is going to get paid, isn't he? Say in the not anything less than the 9 million range is unreasonable. Um, when we put out those reverse retro jerseys, obviously him being the star player had kind of modeled the jersey, and You can tell where Elias Pettersson is at in his gym routine by looking at his neck, quite frankly. And he didn't look like, I mean, he looked like a 15-year-old kid. Now I think he's kind of growing into his body and looks more like an 18-year-old kid. But he had been asked, I think it was on the Chicklets podcast, about, people are saying, well, what are you doing to work out? He's like, I've worked out my whole life. He was just a small guy, but I think he'll continue to take massive steps forward. I don't think people really understand um, how talented the guy can ride a unicycle and juggle, for crying out loud, at the same time. Like, that's kind of unbelievable, just his hand-eye coordination and everything else. So I think he'll take a couple more steps forward. Yeah.
And going on to the coaching staff, Travis Green is entering his 4th year as head coach in Vancouver, and he's had a way of continuing to advance this team and improve this team, as they were a basement team his first year, and then they were a 500 team his second year, and then of course last year able to get into the playoffs and cause some damage in the playoffs. What do you think that he is able to do, that he brings to the table in Vancouver, that's made him a successful coach so far?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. So, rewinding the tape about 8 years, I was convinced Willie Desjardins, before he was a hockey coach, he was a social worker. This guy got his master's in social work, which basically means he's a people person. His whole entire course of study was to get inside people's head and see how he can help them. I say that in a very general way. I don't know what his specificity was or what certifications he carried after that. And so I was so sure that he was going to be great with the guys. And, it just never panned out. I remember he may have had, we had had, at one time it was like 50 games into the season. He had 36 too many men penalties on the ice. Good grief. What is going on that? That might be a world's record of too many men penalties on the ice in a single season. And then obviously Barella, there were some dark days, but I knew Travis Green was the real deal. I had gone up to see Vancouver play Buffalo, and they were playing Boston 2 nights later. And Boston had their number that game. It was a 5-2 game. The thing I loved that I saw about Vancouver, which was so indicative of Travis Green, the way he coaches that team, is their intensity and their fire was up there until the clock ran out. They were playing as hard in the last 5 minutes as they were playing in the first 5 minutes. They were trying to win that game at 5-2. And I don't think Travis lets his guys off the hook. And I don't think there's a lot of quit right now in them, which is opposed to, remember, John Tortorella, one of his press statements when he had met with the Sedins and Edler and Bieksa, so on and so forth, he had said the core of this team is stale. There's nothing here to work with, right? And so again, we had that team in those 15, 16, 17 years that, let's tell the truth, they quit on the play quite often, or just, it was just every game felt like another Tuesday night game, and they were trying to play defensive hockey, and there wasn't, I don't mind losing as a Vancouver fan. I don't mind losing as a hockey fan, but good God, put your heart into it. But play like you're there to play. And that's what we've seen for 4 years now from Travis Green. Is we've seen they may not always win, but they play like they came to win more often than not. And we had not seen a lot of that in the 3 or 4 years prior to that. So I love that. I'm loving this Vancouver team. I'm a big fan of Travis Green. Vancouver is a city with, from what I can tell, with huge expectations that, just based on that little bit of hockey, they think we're a Stanley Cup contender, and we better be lights out this season. That's just not the reality of anything. But they're a very good team with a lot to build with a great coach, as far as I'm concerned. So,
If we go ahead and look at the standings from last year, it's not points, because of course everybody finished with an odd number of games. But we see Vancouver at the top of, like, right in the middle there, with a clump of Western Canadian teams. And of course, it's been so long since last season, so it's hard to read too much into this. But we do know it's going to be a tough division, and like you said, Vancouver historically has struggled against Canadian teams. Where do you see Vancouver finishing in the standings this year?
So I'll say this. They're the biggest question mark of the seven to me. I've talked with a couple other guys about it. I think more than any other division, most of these teams are probably going to be separated by a point or two, right? I think there's going to be a lot of teams in the thick of it. I could see them at the top. I'm also a realist, and I could see them at sixth or seventh. But as a fan, I'm never going to bet against my team, so I see them finishing at second, just from a fandom, not from a logic perspective. From a fandom perspective, I hope and think they may finish as high as second. So,
If you had to pick three teams that are going to miss the playoffs this year, if you had to pick who is going to fifth, sixth, and seventh, who do you think is going to not qualify for the playoffs out of the Canadian teams?
you know, you're an Ottawa fan, which intrigues me. I remember when I moved to Dallas. Dallas was like they were like the streakiest team in the league, where on any given night they were like just torching teams 6-1 or being beaten 5-1. I feel like Ottawa is going to be that team this year. I feel like they've got a new roster, a bunch of young guys. I think they're really excited. I had wished they had brought Zdeno Chara on, and I think that the symbology of that would have been powerful, to where like the old jersey's back, and we brought the big man back, and we're back, and we're playing real hockey for real this time. So they intrigue me. I don't want to rule them out. Most people would. I don't want to rule them out. Ah, God, it's just shaking up the snow globe and seeing where they land, huh? I think Winnipeg could drift down near the bottom, perhaps. I think Calgary could, and I want to say Ottawa could. I also think Montreal could. We all know that Toronto's, built for the regular season. They'll do well. That's not the question. The question is, what are they going to do after? So, yeah. I'm just gonna play. I'll say Montreal, Ottawa, and Winnipeg sort of float down near the bottom, but I'll say they won't be separated by many points at all. So,
Right on. And final question for you. If you had to make your early preseason Stanley Cup prediction, who would you take?
the safe bet is Colorado, right? But I mean, this is like that's boring, right? Nobody brought me on here to make the safe play, so I'll say, hmm. I'll just shake up the puzzle. I'll say Carolina goes all the way. Sure, why not?
That's a good pick. I love their team. I love Vancouver's young team. They've got a lot of young players that I'm excited to watch this year, and I hope that you enjoy watching them continue to develop as well. Thank you very much for taking the time to come on the show, and enjoy the opener tomorrow night versus Edmonton.
Oh, Ryan, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here. I appreciate you.
Thanks again to Jeff for coming on the show. You did a fantastic job teeing up the season for the Vancouver Canucks. If you're watching this episode on YouTube, feel free to leave a comment, or subscribe, and tune in for the next episode, as I'll have Justin Allery on the show to preview the season for the Montreal Canadiens. Pajot. First round pick, Mason, Silverberg for Ryan, McCulloch, Kovalev, California road trips, Lalim, Hasek, Gerber, carousel of goalies. Buddy Robinson, Ben Harper, Bobby Ryan, Spartacat, Boro, Hoffman, LeBreton is a no-go. Elliot, Anderson, Alex Aldis back again. Dorian says, we're a team, someday we will win the cup. We didn't start the rebuild. It was always brewing since 2009. We didn't start the rebuild. No, we didn't start it, but this time we've got it.